welcome back to another mathematics episode. Today we're talking about epidemiology and especially about incidence and prevalence. Epidemiology is the analysis and the study of health and disease conditions within a defined population. It's a discipline within medical science, which is based on data collected from the defined population. It investigates disease outbreaks and transmission, but also environmental factors. Nowadays, it's not only applied to pathologies, but also to conditions like obesity. Epidemiologists not only investigate the frequency of disease, but also who is affected. Those findings make it an essential element for monitoring and then managing public health issues. Now, let's first talk about prevalence. Prevalence is a quantitative measure to describe the proportion of people within a particular population which suffer from a specific medical condition at a given time point. And it might be depicted as a fraction, usually per 1,000, 10,000 or 100,000 cases per people, or as a percentage. A prevalence of 10 out of 10,000 means that 10 out of 10,000 individuals had, for example, a stroke in this defined population for this year. And if you take a look at the two drawings, you see, and this is important, that populations may vary. On the left side, we see more red dots, so more, let's say, stroke events, than on the right side. Incidence, there we have to differentiate between the incidence proportion and incident rate. Incidence proportion is again a quantitative measure, and this is used to determine how many people, relative again to a specific number of individuals, are diseased or suffer from a condition like obesity. And here an incidence of 10 out of 10,000 means that we expect 10 stroke events within 10,000 individuals per year. Now, incidence rate also takes into account that it takes some time to develop a condition, and if we're talking about a study, that people are enrolled to different times. For some, there may not be any follow-up data and things like that. The problem is that it's no longer so intuitive and also harder to calculate and to interpret. So here we're talking about a time span. If we're taking a look at this example with those three studies, including 42, 60 and 25 participants, the observation time differs, and now we can calculate the study month which someone was at risk. And then we divide the number of stroke events by the number of study months that someone was at risk. Then we get the incidence. The incidence of 0.088 is per one person. So if we multiply it with 1,000, we get an incidence of 9 out of 1,000 people which suffer a stroke. Those are all just fictional numbers, so don't worry about those. It's just to illustrate the whole principle. So the key difference between prevalence and incidence is that we use prevalence to see how widespread a condition is. Incidence, however, is used to predict the risk of someone for suffering a pathology. Now, when incidence is, let's say more or less constant, the equation prevalence equals incidence multiplied by the duration describes their relationship. So we use incident when it comes to disease risk, especially when looking at risk factors. And now a quick word about mortality and morbidity. Mortality again is a quantitative measure, here for the number of deaths within a specific population or a certain time period, denoted here as the black dots. And it mustn't be confused with morbidity, which describes any physical or psychological pathophysiologic state. Common morbidities are, for example, diabetes and stroke. This was a quick overview over, above all, prevalence and incidence. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for weekly uploads about scientific topics.